as movement becomes mainstream, managing it, of course, demands a strategy. In August 91, Linus Torvalds, then a 21-year-old student of computer science at the University of Helsinki, casually announced, posting that I'm doing a free operating system, just a hobby, won't be big and professional like GNU. As it happened, his hobby resulted in the development of the world's first free operating system, the Linux, and kickstarted the open source software movement. Exactly 3 decades later, open has become one of the major ways in which software is developed. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Analytics Insight podcast, where we dive deep into the innovation trends and transformative technology shaping the future of businesses. And I'm your host, Priya Dialani. Now, of course, companies now today are using open source software extensively, and it's increasingly shaping enterprise software architectures. Now, over the years, open source software has moved from being a niche or movement to becoming a driving force behind enterprise IT strategies. But how has its perception changed? And what role does it play in the future, especially in cutting edge domains like AI and edge computing? And how are organizations leveraging it while addressing critical concerns like security and compliance? Now, to help our listeners unpack these questions, I am thrilled to welcome Joseph Garcia, General Manager, Asia Pacific at SUSE. Hi, Joseph. How are you doing?
Hey, Priya. I'm really doing great. Thank you for having me on the podcast today. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Joseph. It's a pleasure to have you with us on a podcast today, likewise. And, of course, I think we'll be talking more about enterprise IT strategies, what are different trends that are shaping them. But before that, I would like to know more about, SUSE. So could you help us understand, about the company's specialization, any particular solution it's offering, and what exactly is the pain point SUSE is trying to address?
Yeah, sounds good. Let me tell you first a little bit of history. So SUSE is quite an old company. It was founded around 30 years ago. It was founded in Germany. It is famous for being the first company that created an enterprise Linux distribution. So, we've been over 30 years fanatics and experts on open source. So overall, SUSE is an enterprise software company that uses an open source development model. What that means is we work with communities like the Linux community to make sure that we bring open source innovation to enterprises so that those enterprises can use these innovations in a safe and reliable manner. So that's a little bit about SUSE. We have several business units. All of them based on an open source development model. We are very famous for Linux. We build Linux and we manage multiple Linux, but we also have a cloud native set of solutions that help build cloud native applications. We have solutions that help companies build edge innovation. For companies like manufacturing or retail or telecommunications companies. And we also have an AI set of solutions. That's a bit about SUSE, Priya.
Great. Thanks, Joseph, for helping us understand. Of course, when we're talking about open source software, I think that is something that is pretty much inevitable in today's world of technology, and of course with different cutting edge and emerging technologies coming into picture, I guess we're going to see more of more advancements in open source software, and how probably they are going to easy our lives that way. So thank you for sharing that. Having said that, Joseph, we would also like to know more about you. So if you could help us understand, how has the journey been till date? Tell us more about yourself. What exactly is your role and contribution towards SUSE, or probably what triggered your interest to be part of SUSE?
Yeah. So originally I'm from Spain, but I've been more than 30 years in Asia Pacific, so I understand Asia Pacific pretty well. I've been in India many times. I was just there last week. So I visited many customer organizations, many partner organizations. My whole career has been built on software businesses, more than 20 years on open source software. So I've been working with Linux and with areas like Kubernetes Linux for more than 20 years, Kubernetes now like probably 7 or 8 years since it started becoming popular. I joined SUSE in June 23, so I've been around a year and a half with them. And my role is managing the business in the Asia Pacific region, and we're doing great. Actually, the last year was our best year in the last 4 years, both in terms of revenue and growth. Although that's not all because of me, it's definitely because of the team that we have in the region that is performing really well.
Definitely. Thank you, Joseph, for that brief introduction about yourself. And, I think we're talking about the growth of the company or the impact. I think with the entire team comes into play and, help us define the path forward. Let's talk and, about the main topic, the open source software. I think if you start with the big picture, I think, the open source software has definitely come a long way, which has just been a mere passion project for someone, and now it has become more of a strategic tool for enterprises. So, how have you seen, the open source evolve in enterprise IT specifically in the last 5 to 10 years? Or what are some major shifts that stand out to you, and how it has kind of transformed enterprise IT?
Yeah, maybe I'll start telling you. I remember when I first started working with open source, and I was pitching to customers about Linux. And at that time there were two typical questions. The first one was, why should I pay for open source if it's free? And the second one was open source secure? And every time that I was meeting a customer or even a partner, those would be the two questions, and I would have to spend a lot of time educating them on open source and the open source development model and what a company like SUSE does in terms of bringing the open source innovation into an enterprise ready kind of ready to consume model, right? I can tell you that no customer now asks me, why is open source not free, or why do I have to pay for open source? And no customer asks if open source is secure. So there's been a massive shift in terms of understanding what open source is about and how open source can be consumed safely. The most important thing that people understand now is, one, that open source development model drives way faster innovation than a closed source development model. And it's kind of intuitive, right? But people didn't quite understand it early on, but I think that now they get it. When you're building software on an open source development model, every single additional engineer, developer that contributes is adding on each other's innovations. Versus in a closed source development model, you're constrained by the number of employees that company has. So, intuitively makes sense. If the Linux community is tens of thousands, the amount of innovation that happens in that project is significantly faster than on a closed source project. And that's the reason, if you think of Linux, 20 years ago, if you looked into a data center in any organization in India, it would probably be mostly Unix for the most critical workloads, and then Windows. That was pretty much what it was, right? The data center, maybe they would have some mainframes, but that was pretty much Unix and Windows. And now you go to pretty much any data center, there might be a little bit of Unix left for some very old applications that are very difficult to modernize, but the majority of the data center is Linux. So the thing that to me has been the biggest change. We've then seen it after that with cloud native and Kubernetes becoming the standard open source project to enable high scale cloud native workloads. And again, in 7-8 years that Kubernetes has started becoming popular, no one doubts that if you want to build a cloud native microservices based container application, that is going to be managed with a Kubernetes orchestration engine. And whether it is a big cloud provider or is a company like NPCI, the National Payments Corporation of India, with UPI running on microservices on Kubernetes, that's become a de facto standard. What's exciting now in this where we are today is we're starting to see the same thing with AI, and there's a lot of AI innovation that is happening also on open source, and that's a space that I'm eagerly interested in watching to see how quickly there's innovation through open source communities in the many different AI open source projects happening.
Well, definitely, and I think that's you've shared a couple of fascinating perspectives on how the open source software or the open source trend has evolved in enterprise IT, and it's very clear that the shift towards adopting open source solutions have kind of brought in significant transformational changes in terms of collaboration, cost effectiveness, how we are working today, or even in terms of triggering innovation or making innovation possible. So, and also, like you said, the growth of open source software continues as technological advancements increasingly favor open source methods. I would like to particularly highlight blockchain projects. Now, open source is definitely crucial in today's society because it democratizes access to technology, creating very transparent and collaborative environment. And developers worldwide can also collaborate, innovate, and build on each other's work because eventually it accelerates a software development and produces more secure solutions. So, what factors have driven the increasing trust and acceptance of open source solutions in enterprises?
I'm going to be a bit selfish with my answer, Priya, but I think that the primary factor that has driven adoption has been companies like SUSE. In the very early days of open source, every company out there thought, I can go to the open source community and start building my own distribution of Linux or my own distribution of Kubernetes. But over time, these companies have realized that the complexity of maintaining a distribution is enormous. Think about Linux, for example, to make sure that that distribution is certified on many different hardware platforms from many different hardware vendors, or to make sure that software like a database or a web application server that they're also certified and that they work well. And then, to ensure that you have someone that can help you on the spot when you have a problem, if you're running that problem, particularly on a mission critical application that might have severe negative consequences if the application goes down for extended hours or days. That's what we are doing. That's what a company like SUSE does. A company like SUSE builds economies of scale by having the hundreds of developers and engineers that we have, the relationships with the community and support and the certifications and the customer advocacy that we deliver to customers. So at the end of the day, what really has driven that adoption from enterprises was the fact that there's companies like SUSE that make open source consumption really easy and really safe. Easy because, hey, the packaging, the certifications, even the distribution, that's already done by us. And safe because, we leverage our many years of experience to ensure that that version that we package is as secure and stable as possible. But even then, if there's any problems, like software always has problems, that they can call us and they can quickly get an answer to that problem. When I talk about economies of scale, an example is, hey, a customer might call us today about an issue that they're facing with their software, and we might have had that call from another customer, maybe in another country in the US, yesterday or 2 days ago for the same issue, and we might have already a hotfix ready that we can give quickly to that customer so that they prevent the issue. So most of our customers, and we have a very high renewal rate on our service because customers now do see the value. And I think that's been the biggest driver. Companies like SUSE offering this enterprise ready service on the fast innovation that open source gets through the open source communities.
Right, I think that that definitely makes a lot of sense. And of course, while you might think that it was a selfish answer, but no, definitely, I believe that companies like SUSE are acting more of a facilitator in terms of driving the trust and acceptance in terms of open source solutions, because that's more like the need of hour that we need, and especially in large scale IT enterprises, I think open source software and solutions definitely play a very important role. And I was just reading this one survey, and it clearly said that open source is more of critical building block for IoT and edge applications as well. Now, nearly 40% of survey respondents are using or evaluating the use of open source solutions exclusively, while another 35% are looking at a mix of open source and proprietary components. So, do you think that there are ways in which open source technologies can drive the adoption of edge computing in enterprise environments specifically?
Yes, absolutely, Priya. And it's kind of the same concept that I shared before with Linux or with cloud native or now even with AI, but applies to the edge as well. If you're thinking of the edge, at the end of the day, on lightweight computing devices that might sit at a store in a retail company or in a manufacturing plant to try to make smarter manufacturing, less dependent on people and more automated. You're gonna need components like an operating system, or even now that there's more adoption of Kubernetes, and I'm gonna geek out a little bit here, but I know that your audience is quite technical, so I think I'm allowed to geek out a little bit. But there's even a lightweight Kubernetes engine, so that the same way that companies are building cloud native applications, they can use that same mechanism to have applications that run in a remote location, like a manufacturing plant or a kiosk in a retail shop. What SUSE is doing is we again working with communities to ensure that there's a very lightweight Linux. And SUSE, we have this lightweight Linux called SLI Micro, and a lightweight Kubernetes engine. And in SUSE, we have this technology called K3S. We provide the same value proposition that we've been providing with Linux and with cloud native, which is we work with the communities to ensure that there's innovation. We provide advocacy, customers that are using our technology. We can influence communities so that the roadmap of the products is aligned to where customers want to go with these products. And we make sure that this technology, even though it's open source and built in an open source model, that it's stable, robust, safe for them to use. You don't want to be, like for example, a McDonald's, and you're running some of this technology in the kiosks, and suddenly the kiosk is down for 4 hours. That's going to have a significant impact on this revenue if that shop cannot sell for those 4 hours. So by using, edge technology from a company like SUSE, you get that peace of mind that the uptime is going to be significant while you're leveraging the open source innovation.
Right. I think when we're talking about, edge computing and its adoption in enterprises, I think open source technologies play a very revolutionary role, and it definitely can overcome, the challenges of scalability, security, like you mentioned, and of course, integrating open source solution is something that is not like a cakewalk. I believe there's a strategy probably organized enterprises need to follow, and I think historically, I guess many enterprises were very hesitant to embrace open source because of its concerns around your stability, supportability, and of course security. But slowly and gradually, as users and companies started trusting open source, the adoption has now become mainstream. It is so mainstream that around 90% of the components in enterprise software are open source. So we want to know from you, Joseph, that despite open source being very critical component of the enterprise software, how do you think that companies can strike a balance between the flexibility that open source offers and maintain the same support and security as well?
Yeah. To me, the straightforward answer is by relying on a partner like SUSE. We're there to make sure that those open source solutions are robust and stable, and that's what we do every day. So I think for a company to try to digest open source software by themselves, and that there are companies out there still doing it. That some companies that I meet every once in a while say, "Oh, we have great engineers, and they can create their own distribution, and we can maintain our own distribution." While that might be true, they might have great engineers that could maintain the distribution. The key thing is, if you have an issue, how quickly you can resolve that issue with your own engineers. I was telling you earlier, SUSE gets economies of scale. We have hundreds of engineers globally, and because we have around 10,000 customers, whenever a company, say in India, hits a problem, that problem might already be in our radar for a few days, and we might have a solution to that. So I think that relying on a company like SUSE that creates supported distributions on open source projects is the best way for enterprises to consume software. I was in India last week, and I met with MPCI, because MPCI is a major customer of ours. They use our technology as the foundation for the UPI application. You probably know, they process an enormous amount of transactions, in the order of billions of transactions every month. And the traffic is just growing more and more. And they partner with us because that application is now mission critical. If the application goes down, there's going to be a major nightmare. And probably the CIO, maybe even the board, will have to give explanations to the central bank, right? So they recognize that the best way to open source technology, which they're using, but mitigating risk, is by partnering with a company like SUSE.
Right, and I think that was plain, clear, and a simple answer, that when we're trying to, maintain that flexibility, I think having a partner like SUSE on board is paramount, because it helps in terms of the easy integration, and also offers the robust support and security that enterprises are looking forward to in terms of adopting or integrating their open source technicalities in the everyday operations, I believe. We spoke about security, but I guess I really want to still want to press on that issue, because we all know that open source offers numerous benefits, but I also feel that it introduces challenges and risks that need to be proactively addressed. Now, considering breaches cost businesses nearly $4.5 million per incident, one of the most pressing concerns is security vulnerabilities. Now, to mitigate this potential risk, I think it's important that enterprises adopt a very pragmatic, scalable, and a holistic approach to security. But besides that, what are some strategies, Joseph, that you think that organizations should have in place when they're trying to adopt open source, so that they can kind of mitigate the risks that are associated with open source vulnerabilities?
Yeah, let me answer that by focusing specifically on cloud native applications, because there's a major shift happening in technology, where companies are moving from virtual machine based architecture to a cloud native microservices container architecture. VMs became very popular in the late 80s, early 90s, and replaced deploying software on physical servers, and virtual machines added a lot of efficiency in the data center, but it's pretty old technology, and it's not as efficient as building applications using containers. So more and more companies are now building applications using microservices and deployed as containers. The MPCI example that I gave you earlier, but there's many other companies around the world doing that. When you shift to a new architecture, you need to take into consideration how that new architecture can open potential security vulnerabilities. In a specific, when you're building cloud native applications, I was talking about microservices is the way you build them. And instead of having a big chunk monolithic application, you have multiple microservices talking to each other. Traditional security monitoring tools might not have been designed to handle that kind of architecture. So they might be able to check, hey, is this user the person that they say they are? And they might monitor the traffic going from the user to the application and back. But these applications might not be monitoring the traffic between these different microservices. So that's where again, there's a lot of open source innovation happening, because this is a new architecture model. And we've partnered with the community to have this great microservice focused container security tool that, again, the product, the technology is built in an open source manner, which is making the technology advance very quickly, but we create a distribution that companies can consume. And the beautiful thing about this technology is that it can monitor that traffic between the different microservices to understand, hey, is there some irregularity? We work with a bank in the UK where they had an application and their monitoring tools didn't detect any issues, and this particular technology detected a SQL injection, some malicious code injected as a SQL statement to probably siphon data out of that application to an external party. And the tool was able to detect that, alert the customer, so that they could then address that vulnerability before they had any major issues with data being stolen.
Right, Joseph. And I think when we're talking about open source, there's no question that it offers unparalleled opportunities for innovation, collaboration, and growth within the software development ecosystem. But by proactively adopting strategies like you have just suggested, and companies will be in a position to address the security vulnerabilities, and by leveraging some of the best practices related to open source integration. I think enterprises can harness the power of open source to drive innovation and deliver some world-class software solutions that are really needed to meet the evolving needs of users and, of course, stakeholders alike. So, having said that, Joseph, one last question for you. How do you think that what do you think is the future of open source solutions, or what are some of the trends that you think will come up in the coming years and that will shape the future of open source software and solutions?
Yeah, I think, Priya, that you're going to see continuous innovation happening in open source in general across the existing areas like Linux or Kubernetes, but across many new areas as well, right? The one that keeps me very excited right now is AI. And we are at a very interesting point on the development of Gen AI algorithms, and there's so much innovation happening in AI using open source. There's many new large language model algorithms that are being released on open source, and you're going to see an amazing amount of innovation in that area. And what SUSE is doing about that is that we want to do in that space the same that we've done in the past with cloud native, and the same that we did 30 years ago with Linux. We want to make sure that we give our customers a way to leverage that AI innovation that is happening in open source in a way that is safe and reliable. One of the biggest concerns when you talk to customers that want to play around or want to adopt AI, artificial intelligence, the biggest concern that they have is their data leaking out, and their data ending in places that they did not expect. And we've built a SUSE AI solution that helps companies address that, that helps them be in control of their data so that they can take the best of that innovation that is happening in communities around AI, Gen AI, but run it safely with their data being protected and with the environment being under their control. I'm very excited about that area because I think it's going to, it's going to be as life changing as the internet was 20 years, 30 years ago. And we're going to see some amazing innovations happening thanks to AI.
I completely agree with you. I think with the growth and the innovation that AI brings onto the table, I think we are definitely going to see some major transformations, which will definitely shape the future of open source. And eventually, I think a balanced approach is very much essential because it emphasizes the importance of transparency, accountability, and also collaboration in an open source development. So, of course, eventually, I think more efforts are needed to build and maintain the trust within the open source community, and recognizing that trust is not just a technological issue but also social one. So once we address the security vulnerabilities related to open source, I think we will definitely foster a culture of trust and collaboration, and we can definitely see more continued success of open source software for the years to come. Well, thank you so much, Joseph, for such an insightful discussion. It's clear that open source software is not just an alternative, but more of a cornerstone of enterprise IT innovation. And like you mentioned, from artificial intelligence to even edge computing, I think it's shaping the future of technology in profound ways. So thank you so much for your time. It was a pleasure having you with us, Joseph.
Thank you, Priya, for having me.
Thank you so much, Joseph. So, this is for our listeners. I hope you enjoyed today's conversation. Stay tuned for upcoming podcast, and you can view all our previous podcasts on Spotify and other leading platforms. Thank you so much.